I think. And we initially came down with a tech company. So for those who have been here long enough, you might know me wearing that hat. It was a Dapley hat. So we had like plug and play home servers, stackable storage, mesh Wi-Fi, some other cool things. Working on some patents that we're bringing where blockchain ties into secure hardware, and just other fun stuff like that. I got into Bitcoin in 2011. The guy I ran a rugby team with in college told me about it, and I thought that was awesome. I spent pretty much all of it in 2012 on t-shirts and stupid things that I don't own anymore. So that sucked. But yeah, so I'm a hodler. I don't really trade or get into much. I'm normally busy doing other things, but I've always been really deep and focused on the sovereignty, freedom aspects of things, so the ethos that's normally behind certain projects. So I tend to just surface maybe once every 5 to 6 years with a project or initiative that I'm working on. Otherwise, I'm normally doing something else. Like right now, or the last 5 years or so, I've been working in economic development for the island. So I work with Invest Puerto Rico. Spent like 11 months working my way into that organization. To be in charge of business attraction for innovation, investment, entrepreneurship efforts. I built and run an investment platform for the island called Enroller for anyone who's raising capital to list on, an ecosystem database map that shows most of all the startups and innovative corporates and co-working spaces and accelerators and funding groups and everything that's open and accessible and free to anyone. Panoramicapr.com. So I work on different platforms. I work with a bunch of companies, investment, innovations coming down. And honestly, there's awesome stuff happening. That's a whole other tangent for a different day, but
you can see why he's one of my favorite people on the island, right? He's actually doing a lot of really cool stuff, has been since I first met him. And it's like, when people say, hey, I'm thinking of moving to Puerto Rico, or what's the startup scene like in Puerto Rico? Are there any accelerators? Like, can I actually get my project done? The first place I send him is Brian. Brian knows everything that's going on, whether it's through the universities, through the government, through the like you said, the co-working spaces, all that stuff. So super appreciate you, Brian, and everything you do for the island. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to take things kind of like in a story into Morpheus to tie into stuff. So, like I said, I just kind of surface every once in a while. I was big in my other projects. When I came down here initially, was more often at Crypto Mondays and other stuff like that, which we're just starting. Then kind of off the grid, always there lurking, advising, maybe getting involved or entering into different projects, but ones that I felt comfortable just buying and forgetting about. I never really have an intention to sell when I acquire something, which is different than a lot of people, but I'm too busy. I just can't handle it. So that's just kind of how it works. So when Morpheus came around, so Morpheus AI is essentially an open source infrastructure to run artificial intelligence and smart agents. I came into contact with it in early October of last year. What had happened is in September, I think September 2nd, whatever Keanu Reeves' birthday is, a white paper was dropped by 3 pseudonymous people, Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus. Don't know who that actually is, but in real life, I mean. But so that was kind of dropped, and I found out pretty quickly about what this Morpheus AI thing was. And for me, just like Bitcoin, I only needed to hear a couple things, and I was like, oh, sovereign, open source, uncensorable, artificial intelligence infrastructure, and I love infrastructure, having built plug-and-play home servers and networks, trusted networks, and things like that. So I was like, oh yeah, that's like all I had to hear. And then it was like a bunch of other stuff, and it's been nonstop the last however many months it's been with new, almost like mind-blowing things that make up what is Morpheus, which now we'll get into.
I love it. Great intro. I think one of the ways I think about it is that we've kind of outsourced our intelligence to these devices. Like, how many people use this device constantly throughout your day, right? Like, constantly. And it's really a part of it's an extension of your own ability to be intelligent and to reference information that you need to do your job or connect with other people. And this is going to be essentially, a lot of people argue, replaced with our own personal artificial intelligence systems. And whether it's going to be a little thing like she or her or whatever it is talking to us, in our pocket or whatever, there's going to be something out there. The form factor isn't what matters as much as what it's going to do for us. And the idea that a few small companies and or governments get to control that is pretty terrifying. It's the idea that your ability to be productive as a human, your intelligence is going to be restricted, whether it's by some government jurisdiction or some personal, almost want to say vendetta, as far as certain CEOs and the ways that they want to shape the world. And as an early, I'm a little bit later, 2013, but as an early advocate for Bitcoin and self-sovereign control of your own value, this idea that my intelligence is even more important than my money. I use my intelligence to be able to create value for myself and my family. If that gets restricted, I'm in trouble. And so thinking about Morpheus as the framework for incentivizing open source, a framework for incentivizing keeping these tools available and free and accessible by anyone, and at the same time, I've been involved in lots of projects that try to incentivize open source developers. Most of them don't go well because it's just, they get the token, they dump the token, and then there's no demand for the token. So the economic engine doesn't function well. So far, my understanding of the economic engine of Morpheus is pretty exciting. So maybe we should start there. Let's start with the $520 million that have been staked into Ethereum through Lido, into Lido, and that reward that would normally go to those Ethereum holders instead is going to the project. And generally, most people think, oh, well, that means there's a team, there's a company, there's a DAO, there's a group of people basically taking that money and putting it in their back pocket. Very different in Morpheus in that instead, those funds are coming in and they're actually basically buying up Morpheus and putting it in a liquidity pool owned by the protocol. And so it's just an amazing thing that constantly there's more liquidity and more demand for the token. So all these open source developers that are being incentivized with the Morpheus token actually have a place to exchange it for Ethereum, pay their rent, whatever.
Yeah, so that's another thing that I was not aware of initially when I got excited, but then I became more excited because in early to mid 2019, I was part of a DAO called Block Zero, and we had toyed around with this same sort of capital raising, not even capital raising, but funding mechanism for projects where you were able to stake, in that case, multiple different types of tokens and redirect that yield to fund projects. And I've always loved that idea because I never want to give up anything. I'm a hodler and I don't want to drop I don't want to part with anything. I'm the tight-fisted, annoying founder that doesn't want to give up equity, whatever. I just don't want to. But I'm happy to support with my yield projects and gain exposure, even if it's only a little bit at a time, in that manner. And I think that's a much more sustainable growth pattern for projects that are legitimately building something. Now, to do that and have it done well, you need to have critical mass. And in 2019, we did not have that. With that project, it wasn't built out as much as what is now known as More 20 that Morpheus is built out. We can dive deeper into that right now. But essentially, in this case, since February 8th, kind of how the project has worked, it's been open source. There is no team. Obviously, there's some people who speak up and talk more about it and whatnot and have contributed more than others, but there is no single gatekeeper or anything like that. There's been other people who have submitted yellow papers over the white paper, just other things to just kind of expand more and more. And then instead of sitting around like a DAO and everyone voting for everything and hoping you come to some sort of consensus or whatever, people are just straight up building, and the good stuff is what surfaces to the top. So it's show me first. It's not wait and get a grant and then promise you'll do this and then hopefully you do that. People are doing the work ahead of time because they actually are driven and care. And on the same token, those who maybe aren't builders or who are builders but also have capital have been able to put in capital as well. So how this works is, as Luke was saying, you can take your stake ETH, put in the Morpheus contract, and that's just redirecting your yield that you'd be normally getting to the project. And like Luke said, it goes right to the liquidity pool in Uniswap. It's not going into a fund that then people are voting and deciding how to dole out or give this money out. It's literally going like unidirectionally into creating liquidity. So every week, and you can see this on chain, every week it's buying more token off the market to balance and make sure there's a balance between the ETH and more. That's building up the liquidity pool. So you have an ever-growing, verifiable source of liquidity forever, essentially, for this project. And that's huge when you compare that to the rug pulls and all the stuff that you see these days, and I've seen over the last few years with these new projects.
I think it's awesome. I want to just, how many people know, like, don't know what a liquidity pool is, or is there any of these terms? Okay, so we have a couple hands. I want to make sure we're explaining this. So DeFi, this is decentralized finance. One of the core principles of it, and this actually came out from the Bancor guys, early EOS guys, is that you can take with a completely decentralized contract, a smart contract, this is running on the blockchain, meaning nobody can manipulate it, no one can control it, no government can shut it down. You can deploy this software, and essentially the software is running on the blockchain, and it allows you to say, hey, let's say we've got a new token like Morpheus, and I say, hey, I've got $100 of Ethereum and I have $100 of Morpheus, and I could just invent, the token out of nothing. And if I put it in this smart contract, in this liquidity pool, then if someone has Ethereum and says, hey, I'd like to buy some Morpheus, they can send Ethereum to the smart contract and they get Morpheus back. Let's say it's $5. So I send them $5 of Ethereum and get $5 of Morpheus. Now the pairing slightly changes a little bit. If you think about it, it's like on this bonding curve, but essentially there's now a little bit more Ethereum in the contract and there's a little bit less Morpheus. So because of supply and demand, the price of those two assets slightly changes, right? There's a little bit more demand for Morpheus because there's less in the contract. And that's kind of a simple explanation of liquidity pool. So it's really important to have a lot of depth. So if you've heard about Coinbase, Binance, these gigantic centralized exchanges, the reason they got so big so fast and all the other ones are kind of like way far behind as far as their liquidity, the ability to move in and out of a position, is because liquidity begets liquidity begets liquidity. People want to go where there's no slippage, meaning you just take $1 million, throw it in, and you get $1 million out of what you want, and nothing happens as far as the price. But if there's not a lot of liquidity, something called slippage happens, you put in your money, and it changes the price as you're buying up what you want, and then the overall price is higher than you expected. So having a lot of liquidity on a project where you're inventing a new token, which is essentially what Morpheus did, is really, really incredible, really innovative. So anyone getting paid in Morpheus, maybe they don't care about cryptocurrency, but they're super into AI and open source, and they're building cool stuff, and they've got bills to pay. Well, they can get this token. They can go to Uniswap, which again, decentralized, completely, no one controls it. They can put in their Morpheus, pull out Ethereum, go change it for their local currency, and buy groceries. And the idea that that is not going to impact the market price, there's not going to be a lot of, no one's going to notice because there's so much depth in that pool to exchange between the two tokens. So it's a really exciting way to launch a new token, have that recurring revenue model to support all the people adding cool stuff into it. This More 20 idea, and you can learn about this stuff. If we're boring, you can go online on your phone and check out more.org. There's morpheusai.org, is it? And then there's also morelord.com, So there's different, and these websites, there's no team. Just individuals are excited about the project and launch these websites. And you could too. It's that open, and it's across 4 different categories of, there's capital, which we've talked about a little bit. Those who contribute capital get rewarded with Morpheus tokens. There's code, those who contribute actual AI, smart agents, infrastructure, and then the 2 other buckets of the 4 that aren't really fleshed out yet completely is going to be the compute part, where you can actually provide computer resources for these AI models to run on, and then as well as the community part, which is different than most people think.
To clarify that a little bit, so, and we're kind of going backwards on a few things. We're going to make this all make more sense too with what the heck is Morpheus even doing. Working from the token backwards, so there's technically 5 buckets, because it's 24% into capital, 24% into code. That's right. And that's like infrastructural code, like building artificial intelligence and compute routing and like under the hood stuff. Then there's obviously the compute, because anyone can provide decentralized compute instead of having a centralized data center or Amazon or anyone else being in control of that. Then what's called community is more, think of it as the smart agent app store-esque side of the, but those who are actually bringing users and demand for the protocol. So those that are bringing in the users and that. And there's a really good example of this, which we get into Venice in a second, but I want to kind of loop around. So there's 24% in each of those buckets, and then there's 4% left in a protection fund. Because this doesn't have a company or a team or anything like that, and it is open source, maybe there will be a bug that works its way through, even though there has been like 7 audits already done on the more 20 smart contracts and things like that. But maybe something happens and we need to rectify it. Or maybe someone in the community gets sued because the government doesn't understand open source software, and we want to rally around as a community and support that person in fighting whatever with legal fees. We'll see. But it's there, so there's 4% for that protection fund. So I want to take a step back so you truly understand, like, what the heck, why does any of this matter in the first place? So it is so important, as we've alluded to, and with Bitcoin and anything else, that we have control and sovereignty. Like the motto I had for our last company was SPOC, security, privacy, ownership, and control. And yeah, monetarily we need that, but also we need that when it comes to our data and pretty much everything else in life. So in this regard, so we're not beholden to OpenAI or Microsoft or a government or Google, none of which are my favorite entities or organizations. We need to have that permissionless infrastructure to run on. And it's interesting how this happens. Like just with Bitcoin, it really stuck out to me in 2011 because Wells Fargo had just shut down all my bank accounts erroneously, and then apologized and said, "What? We can't undo it." So, but you can keep the credit card we signed you up for that we didn't get permission to do in the first place. So just like with Bitcoin, it really rang true with me because I was trying to, like, I'll try to use OpenAI or other things to maybe do a report or review, like maybe a contract I'm doing or something like that, but I always get these, oh, we can't do this, or no, that's too iffy, or like, I'm like, I'm not getting, this isn't working for me. Like, it's artificially not helpful. It's restricted intelligence, which is why we had an unrestricted intelligence summit a couple months ago. But like, that was just so annoying to me. So being able to actually have access to open source models that aren't arbitrarily telling me what I can or can't do, learn, see, create, that's interesting to me. And that's super important. I think you're raising your hand. Hold on a second. Just, well, it's just us doing our own thing, whatever it is. So in this case, we have to take things infrastructurally. And this is another reason why I like it. Like from the ground up, you can't just have open source models. There are a bunch of those, and you can run those. You can run those locally, great. But you need to have compute because not everyone has enough compute potentially to do what they want to do in the house. So what I love is even in October, early October, when I jumped in version 0.0.1 of Morpheus, I could download and drag it into my applications folder. Super simple. Automatically got set up just like any other app. It took longer because it was installing. At that time, it was Llama 2, which is one of the open source models. And then I could run it sovereignly without being connected to the internet if I wanted to, and I could do whatever I wanted. And it didn't tell me arbitrarily that I can or can't do something, or that it won't give me the best answer that it can give me, even though it could give me a better one for some stupid reason. So I like that, and I also wanted to be able to work on stuff that I didn't want to share my information. I didn't want a chance of it leaking into training data of the black box that is OpenAI, which is anything but open. So that was super important. That was just like the very first part. But what really got me going is, and this is coming out, we're actually testing it right now. We're in version 0.0.7, and one of the first smart agent examples that this is another nice marrying between blockchain and artificial intelligence is now what I can do is I can connect to my Ethereum wallet, I can check prices on stuff, great, whatever, but now you'll be able to just chat and say, hey, I want you to go buy me X amount of Ethereum, stake half of it, do this, trade that, whatever. It'll find all the best smart contracts. I'm saying we royally, I didn't do all this stuff, but the community, we created a smart rank for all the smart contracts on Ethereum and EVM compatible to see, okay, which ones are secure, have throughput, have been audited, no exploits, are they open source, closed source. So the AI will go, the smart agent will go find all the best smart contracts that are going to do what you want it to do and nothing else to make sure that executes, and you just have to approve or deny. It can be like 5 different steps on the blockchain, all verifiable, but you also know like your data's not randomly leaking to who knows where either. And just that alone, freaking awesome. I can not spend so much time on the phone with my dad trying to explain how to do or buy or do something and him stressing out about it. Like he just chat, can figure it all out, and he just approve or deny. So like just that one little tiny use case, which is just one smart agent out of an unlimited amount, just like we have apps in the App Store or GPTs on ChatGPT, just that alone is phenomenal. That's just like one component, because you're bringing in decentralized compute, which anyone can contribute to. You could be an individual computer, you could be a network like a Kosh or Hyperbolic or some of these others that aggregate decentralized compute into a pool. So there's a lot you can do, and it's laying that groundwork, which also has phenomenal potential for growth and value, just like early internet protocols or anything like that.
One of the reasons I'm so excited about this example is 0.006 that came out with the MetaMask integration. So you could, again, approve your transactions via your MetaMask. So this also kind of leans a little bit into the AI safety argument of like, I don't want the AI just running away and doing some crazy stuff with my money. Well, it doesn't know your private key, so you still have to approve what it's going to recommend for you. But what I get really excited about this is since 2020, I've been the managing director for the Foundation for Inter-Wallet Operability. We've been trying to make cryptocurrency easier to use with human readable address names. We're in like 70, 80 different wallets and exchanges now. So we're like working to make it easier because we're still way off as far as how complicated crypto is. To send and receive tokens, to interact with smart contracts, it's horribly difficult for normies, for most people. And it's like the early days of the internet. Last week at Crypto Mondays, Sam Cassette was here, and he said it was like Usenet. It was like IRC, like that bad. And if you've been around the internet as long as we have, 90s and played with this stuff, it was really difficult early on. And that's still where we are with crypto. And the idea that we could just jump over all that complexity, as we saw with 100 million users signing up to OpenAI, everyone knows how to chat. If you've been on the internet for more than a week, you know how to connect with your friends and do a chat. And so essentially, that now becomes the interface for cryptocurrency. You can just chat with it. And most people who don't want to get involved, they're like, well, I need some expert who can sit next to me and like walk me through it and explain what's going on, and I want to be able to ask questions. Like, you now have that with the AI. You can just ask it, hey, how do I do this? What's this about? Am I doing this right? What does this mean if I do that? And it's right there, walking you through it, explaining it, and I get so excited to think it's almost like some nations are no longer doing landlines; they're just going right to cell phone. It's like, why even bother with all this crazy complexity of user experience when you can just chat and it does what you want it to do? So super excited about that example.
Yeah, and again, that's just one, but it's a huge one that ties things together. The most prominent one right now would actually be Venice AI. So if you know Eric Voorhees, he's also an early contributor in the Morpheus network, but he launched Venice AI a couple of weeks ago. Think of it as a ChatGPT competitor, but completely private and permissionless. So this runs in your browser. So any of the data that you share actually stays in your browser storage and never goes to any other server. So there is no attack vector, there's no, oops, we accidentally leaked the information while we had it in our temporary session or anything like that. Compared to ChatGPT, for example, obviously it's running on their servers, but now they have new temporary sessions or windows or chats. And I was chatting with it, asking how it works, and doing that. I was like, since it's temporary, where are you storing the information? And it still brings it, stores it in OpenAI's data room and everything else. So it's still going on their infrastructure. They're just hopefully deleting it like they say they do. But even if they don't, and even if they have decent best intentions, that's more attack vectors for that information. And there's just some stuff I don't want to share. Or if you deal with investments or NDAs or anything else, like you just can't take that risk to share stuff. So this is one that I love because I can get all the benefits, and now it's just what you can do. You can switch between different open source models. So whether it's Llama 3 or some variation of that, or you can put in Grok or whatever open source model you can switch between and be utilizing, and all that's saving locally. And in time, I would expect that that can then sync with maybe your on-computer local Morpheus AI that you're running, so you can be on the web using Venice, exploring a little bit more out there and connecting to the internet, but also syncing that locally on your computer. So that's great, and it gives you the ability to customize the prompts and train it how you want. So for example, and just a couple days ago, it popped up, I could really easily add like macro level prompts, like, hey, I always want you to answer me like, I don't know, whatever figure, like Donald Trump, or what, I mean, I don't know what you'd actually pick, but you can have it, you can change it to as like, they call it degrees, like warm or cold, like how creative do you want it to be, how just straight to the point do you want it to be. You can adjust all those things yourself and not have to just accept whatever the big company or government chose for you. And I think that's great. I'm still playing around with it. I don't even know what the best mix for myself is yet, but I have started like uploading a bunch of stuff that I normally wouldn't because I know it's being stored locally, and chatting with it and asking about it, and even putting like, hey, here's some of my like personal goals in life. If anything that I'm chatting with for this business venture or whatever, like, is making me veer way off of what I actually want, like, jump in there and tell me like, hey, are you sure you actually want to do that? It's not congruent with what you say you want for your life. Like, that's just something I'm playing around with, just saying. But I would never do that with something that I don't trust when it comes to my data.
It's awesome. And we've been going 30 minutes already, and then we could go for another 30 minutes. Is there anything key that we should mention first, and then let's jump to questions?
Yes. Sorry. Just to continue on a little bit more. Distributed compute, super important. One of those reasons is in October as well, Biden signed an executive order that essentially goes into effect in July. We don't know exactly what it will look like, but essentially it says that they're going to decide what size or weight or parameters is too dangerous for artificial intelligence models, and they're going to treat anything that size or bigger as dual-use munitions, so like weapons, and regulate it and treat it as such, which is ridiculous. And that would make anyone who's using a model that, in this case, I think it's the Commerce Department, deems as too big or dangerous, that becomes a felony. And to start using compute or data centers potentially in the US, they can then put in KYC requirements and the same sort of restrictions you go through if you're buying firearms or setting up a bank account or something like that, which is ridiculous, and I fully believe it's unconstitutional and wouldn't stand up, but there still could be that limbo period that could even be years, depending on court systems and whatnot, where if you're doing that compute for training certain models that they arbitrarily deem are too big or dangerous for regular people, then you would need to use compute elsewhere in the world. And one of the reasons why a lot of people are building so fast with Morpheus is to get everything possible running completely out there in the wild open source before those potentially draconian measures go into effect. We don't know exactly what it'll look like. Maybe they'll have a change of heart. Who knows? But we're not taking that chance. So we're trying to build and push out as much as we can before that anyone can get involved. You could connect your laptop. Now, you may not have the best performance to provide for someone, but when it comes to inference, which is just when you ask questions and the calculations it does, that doesn't take a lot of compute power. What takes a lot with AI is like the actual training of the data and the models themselves. When you're just asking questions, it's not that much. So in that regard, that does create a lot of opportunity for people around the world, anywhere. Even here, if you're in the mountains in Utuado or something like that, you could be connecting, and if there's other people, it's actually going to be quicker and easier and cheaper for them to ping off your computer than go through underground sea cables to a data
data center in Virginia or something like that. So when it comes to certain things, or you're just training locally, that does matter a lot, proximity and things like that. So even if you don't have your own data center, you're just running a GPU or even a laptop, potentially, you could be potentially providing value for someone and making money off that. And again, everything's set up in an open market, so we'll see what happens. I mean, I can't predict anything for sure, but the market will dictate if you're providing value or not and what's needed. And I'm really excited to see, starting next month, what that actually looks like.
Yeah, it's super exciting. We could go on and on about the tokenomics. Again, the liquidity pool depth, the token itself, there's only ever going to be 42 million. They've kind of solved the fee problem you see in Bitcoin where like, oh no, what happens when the block reward goes to zero and it's just fees? They've got a really ingenious mechanism where there's actually going to be a burning of the token and a minting of the token, but never going above the 42 million based on this curve. It's all there. All the documentation's out there. Anything else we should cover before questions? I mean, there's so much we could talk
I mean,
about.
probably, but let's jump into questions.
Let's jump into questions. I'll wander around with the mic and fair enough. Your question there. All right. Question.
And welcome to all the newcomers.
So let's say I buy 1,000 Morpheus tokens, and then I say, okay, well now I want this system, like you were saying before, I want to tell me how to buy, like I'm a newcomer, so I have some Bitcoin, and I want to turn that Bitcoin into Solana, and then I want to buy some Solana, like I want to buy Pepe with the Solana. How many Morpheus will that cost me for it to like put out that, like, here's how you do it, do you want to do this, yes or no, click the yes. Like, is that like one
Zero.
Morpheus?
No.
Okay.
You don't even need the Morpheus to do that.
Right, so I don't need to own any Morpheus to do that. Okay.
Correct.
And then if I have a laptop and I want to, like, quote unquote, mine Morpheus, can I do that or not?
Well, it's not mining,
Well,
but it's
get
providing
Morpheus.
potential
Yeah.
compute.
So if I provide compute, then I would get Morpheus for doing that?
Correct.
Okay. But then you have all these miners that are getting Morpheus, so then, like, what's the tokenomics? Like, what's the buying pressure that you like to buy the compute? You're saying that buying the compute is free. So, like, when I'm buying the compute of how do I buy Pepe with Bitcoin, but then where's the buy pressure come from?
So I'll answer that one. Part of it is that there's $520 million in there. So like we were just talking about earlier, it's $1 million a month is coming in Ethereum to the project. And so if you imagine $500,000 a month of Morpheus is being bought so that you can have half Ethereum, half Morpheus, and then that's put back into the liquidity pool. So there's this buying pressure based on the tokenomics by default. But on top of that, as anyone wants to launch a business on this open source tool set, kind of like Red Hat does or whatever, they can totally do that. There's nothing restricting them. For example, Venice AI is like, hey, you want to connect with a lifetime membership? Have one Morpheus token. That's it. They're just like, just have it in your wallet, connect with MetaMask, and that'll verify that you're part of the Morpheus community, so you can have full like VIP access. So people are going to start doing that kind of cool stuff to create demand for the token, because people are going to want the token just like they want Bitcoin or other assets.
So to go deeper on that, there's a couple different things in your scenario that depend. One, you can use your own compute power for this, because you can run the model locally as it is. So in that case, you don't have to pay anyone anything, because you're literally running it with your own compute resources on your own computer, because it's not going to someone else's servers in the first place, really. Now, the other thing is 1% of the More token is set aside, or of the compute power is set aside for More token holders. So on like a pro rata amount, let's just say, for simplicity's sake, I was sitting on and holding 1% of More token, I would actually get 1% of that daily compute power for free every day, as long as I'm holding that More token. So those who hold More will always have an amount of compute power from the distributed network that they'll have access to for free every single day that they're ever holding any More token. So that is also incentive, and for me it's incentive to hold as much as I can, so I can have free access every day in perpetuity to global compute power, and not to share my too many secrets, but what I'm planning on doing and already doing is I'm working on building other R&D and AI apps for regular boring companies, but instead of running those on AWS or Google Cloud or anything like that, I'm gonna run all those on Morpheus, and they're gonna be paying their regular hosting fees and stuff. But if I'm sitting on a bunch of more token, I'm able to run all of these client applications on the free compute that I have every day. So then what they're paying me is just pure profit at that point. So like, there's some really interesting things that you can do. That's something I'm excited about. So that's just another layer into, and what's kind of surprising, just how well thought out this has been and becoming, because not everything was thought about in the first white paper and never had to change. Like, there's smart people contributing things to this, and I don't know, I just love working with whoever. I don't know half the people, most of the people probably, but they're just genius, and I love it.
All right, another question.
I don't know much about the technical side of this AI thing, but how do I get one of those dope ass t-shirts?
Yeah, figure it out on your own. But soon, you can go to more.store or more.pr.
Yeah, hilariously, people have been printing their own t-shirts.
Yeah,
I
like
want one
this,
too.
yeah.
There was another question over
Kind
here.
of making their own.
I'm excited for you, Brian.
Is there a question or is there just a
Thanks.
comment?
I got questions. Give me a, I'm 61, I'm slow. I mean, just getting a whiff of, what's going on. It's just, I think it's incredible. It's fantastic. How do you even fathom the adoption of it? Because I like the way you move around it. You get some great points too with the education side. Because there's a lot of people not even paying attention. They don't see. I'm excited because I'm like, you said the 90s. I was like, oh, it's my age. So I'm just happy for y'all because this is a blessing to our kids. And it's another thing people listen, So, my question is basically adoption. How do we do that?
I'll give a quick comment, then we hear your answer. I think 100 million users going into OpenAI demonstrates that there's a demand for this right off the bat. So if we can make it, one of the things that shocked me about these open source models is prior to Morpheus, you couldn't just download it, install it, and use it. Morpheus just took these models, and you don't have to know about the command line and all these complicated processes to install something. You just run it like any other application. That type of thing makes that adoption, that demand, much easier. But then you obviously still have to get the word out, and that's kind of what we're doing tonight. But what's your answer to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the real answer is that's what the entire bucket for like the smart agent community aspect, which is the last one to go live, because you have to have the infrastructure. We're still so early. We're only halfway through setting up the infrastructure at this point, and there's already tons of value created. When smart agents go live, and anyone can be building and running and plugging into compute without asking permission or anything, and just plug in, that's when you have everyone who's like the app developer. Think of the App Store. When the App Store for Morpheus comes online, the smart agent store essentially, anyone can build anything to attract anyone to do everything on Morpheus. So everything you see OpenAI doing with every GPT or every little one of those little micro apps can be ported over and actually done on Morpheus instead. And ideally better and more private and more permissionless. So we're not even to the point where like adoption is even the focus yet. So it's going to be phenomenal, and I'm really excited to see this fall, especially what that looks like when that component goes live. Because again, 24% of all the token is being emitted for the next 16 years is going to those builders to attract people, and that's what you're getting. And that's another difference. So like that's what you're going to get paid on for those people. It's not you have a good idea, you get grant money for it, and you get paid for it, and hopefully build it. I'm bringing this app, let's just say this smart agent, and based on how many people actually like it and use it, is going to dictate how much money I make. So it's very free market focused. So those who are building phenomenal things are going to get probably a phenomenal return on that. And that's going to have the competition of the free market, which works better than most anything else, working for Morpheus and running on Morpheus. So Venice, Eric wanted to be a very early one. Even right now, the whole infrastructure's not even done yet, but he has that out there. He's bringing in a bunch of users and building up that base because he wants to be kind of like the big initial smart agent on that. So yeah, it's to come. You're still super freaking early. what it will do is you can open up sessions that you're using for compute, and that session could be open for a long time or a short time. And that's not to be super technical, but that's also so you're not like trying to do a transaction on the blockchain like every second for every question that's being asked. So you open sessions. So I might have a session open for XYZ client, and if I do reach that limit, it's already tied into the wallet. So then it knows, okay, if it hits this, then it's going to be drawing on this wallet that I've connected, and then you close that session and when you need to or when it makes sense. So that's kind of how that works.
Hey, I have a question. I hope this actually makes sense, but I got a couple of pretty decent GPU computers sitting around the house, which I've been wanting to turn into like a locally run AI. Is this usable for that now for like the average person? And like, yeah. And if so, like, can I nerd out with you later on how to do that?
Yeah, and even better than nerding out with me, you can nerd out with Ryan Conjuring, who also lives on the island, who built the entire routing system for that exact use case, and it's in testnet right now. So you can also jump into the docs on the Morpheus AI doc GitHub, and you can actually dive into that right now and start testing it out on testnet, and even playing around with the GPUs you have right now.
So it's local, like you can run this locally right now, tomorrow, if you feel like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, like the first version was exactly that. It was just open source models. You download your computer with a nice interface and you just start chatting with it. And that was available since day one.
And I got a computer sitting around just for this.
Any other questions? Are we going to shut down? Okay, one more question.
We were talking about onboarding, safety, and getting Morpheus to Venice. Show me how to do that. How do you do that?
You're asking to find out. I haven't asked it that exact question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's literally as simple as more.org and click on the dashboard.
Yeah, they have the walkthrough.
It's pretty straightforward.
And if you need to know how to spell that, there you go.
And we mentioned earlier, but the basics is essentially you have to have Ethereum, hopefully in a hardware wallet, and then you go and it walks you through this. You go to Lido, you stake your Ethereum in your wallet. You stake STE, which is your staked ETH. So if you stake one Ethereum, you have one STE. Then you go back to the Morpheus dashboard and you stake that STE to the Morpheus contract, and then from that point on, you're earning pro rata percentage of shares of all the Ethereum that are staked. You're earning that daily issuance of Morpheus tokens. So one more question. And so basically, the more you stake, the more you can earn, and that's how it works. And then also there'll be approvals there. If you're familiar with smart contracts, you have to give it permission to spend tokens in your wallet. Yeah, it's the initial deposit is 7 days because of the way Lido works and everything else. So after that, you can get your capital, your principal back at any time. Yeah. That's after 7 days, you can get it back, and now you take your stake fee and you can go back to Lido and do whatever they do as well. But yeah, after the 7 days, it's completely free to pull back at any moment. So again, you're never putting your capital at risk. The contracts have been audited 7 times. It goes and there's already $500 million provenly in there, and no one's been able to do anything about it. So, are we good with questions? Do we wrap it up?
Well, I'm just going to take that a little
Oh, what's the return? Go to morelord.com.
Yeah,
right?
actually,
I
so
think
go
it's
to
around
morelord.com
30%.
right now. It's been hovering around 30% APY if you're staking, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's taking about $10 worth of stake ETH to generate more. But right now on the market, I think earlier today was like $96 for tokens. Like, there's a huge arbitrage there right now. One of the things I love about the staking aspect is it gives you a real-time barometer of the faith that people have and conviction in the project, because again, they can pull it out at any moment. So you can also see like if writing's on the wall and things keep going down, you might want to start to look into things like, well, why is everything going down? Or why is it going up? And it's been trending up. So there is a bootstrap period from February 8th to March 8th where the token was being generated, minted and earned, but not released into the market yet. And during that time, we consistently had over $300 million worth of ETH stake in the Morpheus contract. It dropped a little bit once you could pull it out and get it on the exchanges and things like that. But now it's over 500 million. So like it went down a little bit. People wanted to even test like, can I get my money out? I know you say I can, but can I? And once that was verified, like everyone's like, oh great. So I've seen some they like pulled it out to make sure they could, and then they put way more in once they do that they and just to show like how real the project is, the real value that's being built. This isn't just a meme coin, as I was saying to some other people, like over 50 million has been paid to actual contributors who have provided code and other value to the network, and that just continues. So that's another reason why there's a lot of people incentivized. They have a great incentive mechanism for people that are actually doing something and willing to kind of like put up before, like say, hey, I already built this. Now paying for it sort of thing, they can have a value obviously. So it's bringing those who are legitimately builders, not just talkers who say they're builders, which I think is great. And it allowed us to build at a new, like normally when I say the speed of open source, I say it's pretty slow. But now I'm like, this is like the true speed of open source, and you have the right incentive mechanisms in. It's going like freaking fast. In less than a year, we're going to entire infrastructure for artificial intelligence to be run decentralized across the entire world. That's phenomenal.
It's awesome. Yeah, so actually both Brian and I are heading to Austin tomorrow. I'm leaving at like 5 a.m. because there's a bunch of Morpheus people that are going to be showing up at Consensus and doing some whiteboarding and just talking about how to keep this thing going. And that, you mentioned it earlier, I just want to highlight it again as we close, that the people involved in this project, David Johnson, Eric Ortiz, yourself, others that are just phenomenal people. You know, they've been around crypto for a long time and they're very, very excited about what's happening. And that to me, I haven't been really doing much the last couple of years. I've been hanging out with my family, I've been wing foiling.
Something that gets Luke.
I'm excited.
The wing foiling board
So,
and his hammock and VR and everything, like it's
So for me, it's like this is really, really a big deal because I've been following even before crypto, I've been following the AI stuff and realizing how important this is for humanity. So I'm just really excited about that. I just want to encourage you all to look into the documentation, look into the project, look for opportunities locally, like you guys just did the free AI day, which was great. It was really well attended. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. Look for opportunities to participate in Morpheus and get involved. This is super, super early days. It's kind of like if somebody came up to you and was like, hey, there's this thing called Ethereum. They're about to do an ICO. Like, you want to learn about it? Like, that's how potentially I feel this is, how big it could be. And again, it's going to be open for not just coders, anyone who can contribute and contribute to this project. So with that, thank you so much, Brian. Big shout out to all the people that make Morpheus happen. It's not just a few people, it's a growing community of people doing a lot.
Yeah, over 260 individuals that contribute like code and other things like that as well. So there's all around the world. Actually, there's more people outside of the U.S. that are contributing than inside. So more.org, MOR.org. If you want to play around with Venice, just Venice.ai. And those are probably two great starting points just to kind of see what's going on. So
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Thank you all. Let's give it a round of applause for Brian. Thank you.